I never thought a clothesline would start a war. I mean, seriously. Of all things, not a barking dog, not a fence too high, not even a party that ran too late. Just a string and some laundry swaying gently in the Florida sun. I'd been drying my clothes that way for years. It saved electricity, smelled fresher, and made me feel like I was doing something a little more natural, a little more right. But apparently my peaceful laundry routine didn't sit well with our local HOA president, a woman named Karen. And if you're already picturing a power-hungry, clipboard-carrying nightmare who speaks in all caps and passive-aggressive emails, yeah, that's her, that's exactly her. It all started with a note taped to my front door, bold letters, thick Sharpie, all caps. Clotheslines are not in accordance with community standards. Please remove immediately to avoid fines. No. Hello, no explanation, no conversation. Just a threat. I stood there holding the note, towel still in hand, while my freshly washed socks danced innocently in the backyard breeze. For a second, I actually laughed. I mean, was this real? A fine for drying clothes? But that laughter faded quickly, because by the next morning, I had neighbors whispering about it at the mailbox. Someone, and by someone I mean Karen, had emailed the entire community board with a photo of my clothesline. In the subject line, she wrote, "Visual pollution for in our neighborhood." That stung more than I care to admit. I'm a 65-year-old Navy vet. I bought this little home to enjoy my retirement in peace, not to get dragged into a suburban shame campaign over laundry. Still, I thought, maybe it's not worth the headache. Maybe I should just take the thing down, but that's the thing about bullies. When you give in once, they never stop. The next day, Karen showed up at my door with a printed list of approved drying methods and warned me again about fines, public citations, and bringing down property values. I asked her to leave. She smirked and said, "I'm just enforcing the rules, sir. If you want to live like this, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you." That sentence sat in my gut like a rock. Maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you. That's when I knew I had to fight back. Not for the clothesline, for my dignity, because if someone like me, quiet, respectful, law-abiding, could get bullied for a few flapping t-shirts, what else would they come after next? So that night I did what every frustrated homeowner in Florida does. I went online, poured a strong cup of coffee, and started reading Florida law like my freedom depended on it. And wouldn't you know it, I found something. One sentence, one beautiful state-sanctioned sentence that changed everything. And when I used it against the HOA, they went silent, because what I had wasn't just a clothesline anymore. It was a solar-powered clothes drying system, and under Florida law, that made it untouchable. I moved into this neighborhood about 5 years ago. After retiring from the Navy and losing my wife to cancer 2 years before that, I just wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere with sunshine, a manageable lawn, and neighbors who waved instead of judged. The house wasn't much, but it was mine. Brick exterior, small porch, one-car garage. It sat on the edge of the cul-de-sac, backed by a short fence and a patch of lawn big enough for my dog, Max, to run around on. The kind of place you imagine when you close your eyes and think, peace, the cacao. HOA brochure called it a thriving, well-managed Florida community. What they didn't mention was that it came with a social order straight out of high school, complete with a queen bee named Karen. Karen wasn't just a resident. She was the self-appointed enforcer of community aesthetics. President of the HOA for 8 years running, she held monthly meetings like they were war councils and walked the sidewalks with a clipboard and that awful half-smile, the kind that never reaches her eyes. She'd already clashed with several neighbors over ridiculous things. One guy got a violation notice for using the wrong shade of beige on his mailbox. Another woman got cited for putting a flamingo statue in her flower bed. A flamingo. In Florida. I mostly stayed off her radar. I didn't host barbecues, didn't play loud music. I paid my dues on time. I even kept my grass edged every other Saturday. But my clothesline, that was apparently where I crossed the line. I'd been using it for a while, one of those retractable types you can pull across the backyard and hook onto a pole. Nothing fancy. I'd string it up in the morning, hang my clothes, and roll. It back by dusk. It wasn't visible from the street unless you really craned your neck. I even positioned it behind a tree for privacy. It was efficient, eco-friendly, and let me feel just a little bit connected to simpler days, back when my mom would hang sheets on the line, and they'd flap like sails in the summer breeze. I didn't think anyone cared. Most of the neighbors were kind enough. There was Mr. Ortega down the street who always waved when walking his dog, sweet old Mrs. Clark who baked bread and left it on doorsteps. Hand Sam, my next-door neighbor, a quiet guy who worked in IT and helped me fix my router more times than I could count. But Karen cared. A lot. She didn't knock. She didn't ask. She didn't even call. She just left that note taped to my door, like some HOA hit job. The wording was so impersonal, so cold, it didn't even feel real. I tried brushing it off, thinking maybe it was a one-off complaint, but then came the photo in the community email. Subject line, an eyesore. Among us, it was humiliating, like being put on trial without a jury. That afternoon, I stood in my yard, staring at the line of still damp shirts and jeans swaying in the breeze. For the first time in years, I actually considered taking it all down, not because I agreed with her, but because I was tired of conflict, tired of being made into a problem. And that's when Sam leaned over the fence and said, "Hey Tom, don't let her push you around. There's got to be a law against this kind of thing." Turns out there was. If I'd thought that note was the end of it, I was wrong. It was just Karen's opening salvo. 2 days after the email went out, I received a formal violation notice in my mailbox. This time, it wasn't a handwritten note. It was an official letterhead with a barcode, a case number, and a list of infractions. Violation: non-permitted outdoor structure, clothesline, visible from adjoining properties. Fine, $50 per day, beginning 48 hours from notice delivery. $50 per day. For hanging shirts on a piece of cord. I stared at it like it was a joke. But the part that got me most wasn't the fine. It was the language, the cold automated tone of it, like I was some kind of criminal. I called the HOA office. Voicemail. I emailed the compliance department. No response. The only person who responded, Karen. She showed up the next morning, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on like she was working security detail. "Tom," she said, like we were old friends. "Did you get our notice?" "Yeah," I replied. "Got your photo in the community thread too. That was classy." She tilted her head. "We just want to maintain neighborhood standards. These little things, they set a tone. A clothesline gives off a certain impression." I folded my arms. "Of what, that I do my laundry?" She didn't laugh, just scribbled something on her pad and said, "We don't want this to escalate." But escalate it did. The next week, I got another letter, this time warning me that continued non-compliance could result in suspension of HOA privileges. No pool, no clubhouse, no vote in the upcoming board election. Like I cared about the pool. But then they did something that did get to me. They posted a list of ongoing violations on the community bulletin board outside the clubhouse. My name was on it, in bold, with the word unresolved next to it. It was humiliating. The next time I walked my dog, I could feel the stares. Not everyone, but enough. A couple whispered greetings. Others avoided eye contact. One woman actually told me she was disappointed in me. I didn't even know her name. And that's when I snapped, not in a loud, throw things kind of way, but that quiet, cold kind of anger that settles into your bones. I went home, took down the clothesline and sat in my kitchen with Max curled at my feet. For the first time since moving in, I didn't feel at home. I wasn't hurting anyone. I wasn't violating noise rules or painting my house neon green. I was just drying my clothes, something my wife used to do before she passed, something that made me feel close to her. And they wanted to fine me, shame me, break me. That's when Sam came over. He brought a printout, something he'd found online. He slid it across the table like it was top-secret intelligence. "Florida Statute 163.04, he said. "Check the last paragraph." I squinted at the page. "No deed restriction, covenant, declaration, or similar binding agreement shall prohibit the installation of clotheslines or other energy devices based on renewable resources." It hit me like a bolt of lightning. The HOA couldn't legally ban it, not in Florida, not if it was for energy-saving purposes. Karen had picked the wrong veteran to mess with, and the next morning, I got to work. Not just defending my clothesline, but renaming it. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than usual. Max was still asleep at the foot of the bed, but I was already dressed, coffee in hand, printer humming in the corner. I'd spent most of the night highlighting, underlining, and rereading every line of Florida Statute 163.04 like it was my new Bible. No homeowners association shall prohibit the use of clotheslines, solar collectors, or other energy devices based on renewable resources. It was right there, in black and white, not vague, not debatable. It didn't matter what Karen thought was tacky. The law said I had the right, and if the HOA wanted a fight, I was going to give them a legal one. First, I printed out copies of the statute, 3 of them, one for the HOA office, one for Karen directly, and one for myself to keep on the fridge like a badge of honor. Then I sat down and wrote the most polite, legally loaded letter of my life. To whom it may concern, I am responding to the violation notice issued regarding my outdoor clothes drying system. Please be advised that under Florida Statute 163.04, I am fully within my rights to utilize a solar-based clothes drying device on my property. I will not be removing the device, and any continued attempts to enforce an illegal prohibition will be met with formal complaint to the Florida State Attorney's Office. I signed it. Thomas M. Hayes, U.S. Navy, Retuit. Then came the fun part. I went out to the backyard and rehung my clothesline. But this time I didn't just call it a clothesline. I labeled it. I made a little wooden plaque and mounted it right on the fence post. Solar-powered clothes drying system, eco-friendly and Florida legal. It was petty, sure, but satisfying. Oh, you better believe it. By noon I hand-delivered the statute and my letter to the HOA drop box. Then, just for good measure, I emailed Karen directly and CC'd the rest of the board. No response for a day. Then, two. On the third day, I got a short, cold email from the HOA lawyer. We have reviewed your notice and statute reference. At this time, no further action will be taken regarding your outdoor clothes drying device. Thank you. That was it. No apology. No admission. Just a quiet backpedal. But Karen? Oh, she wasn't done. She came storming down the sidewalk that afternoon like she was walking into battle. Same sunglasses, same clipboard, same forced smile. You know, she said, voice tight, this really isn't the image we want to present to potential buyers in this community. I leaned against my fence, arms crossed. And what image is that, Karen? Someone following the law? She opened her mouth but didn't have a response. I pointed at the plaque. That's a solar-powered, energy-saving device. Protected by state law. If you don't like it, you can call Tallahassee. Her lips pursed so tight they almost disappeared. And then, for the first time since I moved in, she walked away without a word. No clipboard, no snark, just silence. And in that moment, under the Florida sun, with my shirts drying in the breeze, and I'd never felt prouder to be stubborn. Now look, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a retired Navy guy who wanted to dry his socks in peace, but when I tell you that one sentence in Florida law saved me from HOA hell, I mean it literally. Here's what I found. And if you live in Florida under an HOA, you need to know this too. It's called Florida Statute 163.04. Doesn't sound like much, right? Just a number. But this little number holds serious power. The key part says, no deed restriction, covenant, declaration, or similar binding agreement shall prohibit the installation of clotheslines, solar collectors, or other energy devices based on renewable resources. Now let's break that down in normal people terms. Deed restriction or covenant. That's HOA talk for the rules they think you have to follow. Shall prohibit. That means they legally can't stop you. Clotheslines, solar collectors, or energy devices. That includes your solar panels, your solar water heaters, and yes, even your clothesline if it's used as a way to dry clothes using the sun. In other words, if you're using natural resources like the sun or wind to operate something on your home, the HOA cannot legally stop you, even if your HOA documents say otherwise, even if Karen tries to fine you, even if they send threatening letters. The state law overrides their little rule book. And here's the kicker. This isn't just about clotheslines. This law protects solar panels, rainwater harvesting systems, solar dryers, wind turbines. Yes, even those. Florida, like many states, encourages residents to go green and use renewable energy, so they passed laws that make sure HOAs can't stand in the way. Now sure, your HOA might try to say, but it doesn't look nice, or it brings down property values. That doesn't matter. The law doesn't make exceptions for Karen's aesthetic preferences. What really made me laugh was that the law didn't just say you can have it. It said the HOA could be legally punished for interfering with it. They could have gotten in serious trouble with the state attorney's office if they kept pushing me. That's when I knew I had them beat. So if you're watching this and thinking, wait, they tried to ban my solar panels or they made me remove my garden windmill, go check your state laws. You might have more power than you think. Start with Florida Statute 163.04, especially if you're in the Sunshine State. Print it out, highlight it, keep a copy next to your HOA's rulebook, and smile every time you look at it, because when it comes to your rights, knowledge isn't just power, it's protection. After I sent that letter and cited the Florida statute, things got quiet. Like eerily quiet. No more notices, no more warnings, no angry emails, Not even a passive-aggressive flyer about visual uniformity. It was like the HOA had collectively decided to pretend the whole thing never happened. But I knew better. Karen wasn't someone who gave up easily. And sure enough, about a week later, she showed up at the monthly HOA board meeting, red-faced, stiff posture, and holding what looked like a folder full of printed complaints. Only this time, she wasn't met with nods and applause. She was met with awkward silence. I decided to attend that meeting myself, something I'd never done before. I sat in the back, arms crossed, just watching. Karen stood in front of the board and began her usual spiel. We have a homeowner violating aesthetic standards with a highly visible outdoor structure. It's become a distraction, and I believe it's setting a bad example. She glanced toward me. Didn't say my name, but we all knew. I waited, but to my surprise, one of the other board members, Jeff, I think his name was, raised a hand. Karen, didn't Tom cite a state statute that protects that? Her smile twitched. I misinterpreted. Actually, said Jeff, pulling out a printout, I looked it up, Florida Statute 163.04. It's legit. He's within his rights. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen's face tightened. But it looks tacky. That should matter. Someone else on the board cleared their throat and said, we're not here to enforce personal taste. We're here to follow the law. And just like that, the tide turned. Karen didn't say much after that. She sat down, her eyes flicking between the board and the printout in front of her like she was trying to find a way out. But there wasn't one. That night, as I walked back to my house under the orange Florida sky, I passed a couple of neighbors, sitting on their porches. For the first time in weeks, they smiled. Mrs. Clark waved. Sam gave me a thumbs up. And later that week, someone else, I don't even know who, hung a small retractable line in their backyard. Just like mine. By the end of the month, 2 more homes had solar-powered clothes dryers. We were starting a movement, one sock at a time. As for Karen, well, she wasn't HOA president for much longer. I didn't start a campaign. I didn't rally people. But at the next election meeting, she lost her seat. Quietly, no drama, no confrontation. Just a new board with fresh faces and fewer clipboards. The best part? They mailed out a new memo to all homeowners. Subject: Know Your Rights, Florida Statutes on Energy Devices. Underneath was a quote from the law I'd printed out myself. No HOA may prohibit the use of clotheslines or other energy devices. I pinned that one to the fridge. It wasn't just about winning. It was about proving something, that even in the face of pettiness, power trips, and bad policies, a little research, a little courage, and one well-placed clothesline can go a long way. So here's the thing. It wasn't just about a clothesline. It was about control, about dignity, about knowing when someone's crossing a line and having the guts and the tools to push back. Because if you live under an HOA, let me tell you something. You've got more rights than they want you to believe. Most people think the HOA is like some untouchable government, that their word is law, that if they say take it down, you have to smile, nod, and grab a screwdriver. But that's just not true. HOAs have rules, yes, but those rules can't override your state's laws. In Florida, that law was Statute 163.04, and it made my clothesline legally protected. But your state may have something similar, and that's why you've got to start looking. Here are a few practical steps I wish someone had told me earlier. 1. Get a copy of your HOA documents, your CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Outline what the HOA thinks you can and can't do. Get a copy. Read it, highlight it, know what you agreed to. 2. Look up your state laws. Go to your state government website. Look for keywords like solar rights law, clothesline law, homeowners association legal, limitations, state versus HOA disputes. For example, in California, Civil Code 714 protects solar energy systems. In Texas, Property Code 202.010 allows solar devices. In Florida, 163.04 covers both solar panels and clotheslines. 3. Document everything. If the HOA sends you a notice, save it. If they email you, keep copies. If they speak to you in person, write it down. Date, time, what was said. That documentation is your armor. 4. Use legal wording when you push back. Don't just say, I don't want to. Say, per state statute numerics, this action is legally protected, and the HOA has no authority to override state law. Sounds official. Because it is. 5. Find allies, talk to your neighbors. Chances are you're not the only one frustrated. And trust me, once one person stands up, others will follow. 6. Stay calm, stay classy. Karen wants you to lose your cool. Don't give her the satisfaction. Use your head. Use your words. Use the law. And finally, if you take nothing else from my story, take this. You don't have to back down when you're right. You're not just a name on a mailing list. You're not just a dues-paying nuisance. You're a homeowner with legal rights, and those rights don't disappear just because someone with a clipboard says so. So the next time your HOA tries to push you around, whether it's over a clothesline, a flagpole, a garden gnome, or a solar panel, don't panic, get informed and fight back the smart way. You know what's funny? It wasn't about winning. Not really. It wasn't even about the $50 fine or the list with my name on it, or the angry stares from neighbors who didn't even know me. It was about something deeper. It was about standing in my own backyard, looking at a piece of rope with shirts swaying in the breeze, and realizing that if I let them take this, they wouldn't stop there. I've served in places where freedom wasn't just a word people threw around in slogans. I've seen what it means to fight for it, to live it, and sometimes to lose it. So no, Karen, I'm not taking down my clothesline, because that clothesline, it wasn't just laundry. It was my peace, my habit, my memory. My wife used to hang out our sheets when we were first married, and they'd flap in the sun like flags. She'd hum while she worked, and sometimes she'd clip one of my socks to her ear just to make me laugh. That clothesline is a piece of her, and for someone like me, a widower with too many quiet mornings, those little pieces matter. They matter more than HOA bylaws. They matter more than clipboard bullies. They matter more than keeping up appearances. So yeah, maybe I'm just a stubborn old man. Maybe I'm the guy who put a plaque on his fence calling a string of rope a solar-powered drying system. But here's what else I am. I'm the guy who reminded a few neighbors they still have a voice. I'm the guy who made Karen blink. First, I'm the guy who looked up the law and used it. And you can be that guy too, or that woman, or that couple, or that tenant who feels small and unheard and cornered by rules you didn't vote for. Because in the end, what saved me wasn't anger. It wasn't shouting. It was knowing my rights and refusing to fold them up like yesterday's laundry. So go ahead. Let them roll their eyes. Let them say it's just a clothesline. We'll know better. It's a line in the sand, and I'm not moving it. Know your rights. Don't let HOA bullies win. If this happened to you, teen, what would you do? Like, comment, subscribe, and never hang your voice out to dry.